What is an appraisal? What happens if the real estate appraisal comes in low? An appraisal, a house appraisal, is an unbiased opinion of a home's value at any particular time. And an appraisal is based on the comparable property information, usually within half a mile or so of the subject property. A home appraisal is conducted by an appraiser who is an independent party, usually hired by the lender. The appraiser is hired to establish the current market value of the subject property. This provides another set of eyes on the property and an opinion of the price based on the condition. An appraisal can establish an as-is valuation of the property. They can also do a subject to appraisal based on things like rehabbing the property. So what are the steps of going through the probate appraisal process? As soon as the home is put under contract and we open escrow, the lender should, within 24 to 48 hours, contact an appraisal company to start the process of setting up the appraisal appointment. They will usually or sometimes collect payment from the buyer for the appraisal, and that's typically around $500. They're collecting those funds up front for the home appraisal so that they have it paid for in case the buyer should, for some reason, not go forward with the purchase. They will then pay some of that money to a third-party home appraisal service. Important thing is that the lender does not get to pick who that home appraiser will be. Once the real estate appraisal is scheduled, the listing agent is typically the person that the appraiser will contact in order to gain access to the home. So that's when we have to be prepared that the home is in the best condition it can be for that home appraisal. Of course, our goal is to get the highest appraised value of the property, and my team and I will supply the appraiser with 3 sold comps and 1 pending comp, comparable properties that have recently sold or one that is pending a sale within half a mile of the home. These homes that are chosen would have sold typically within the last 6 months. If it happens to be a subject to appraisal, which we don't do very often, we would also provide a list of items that would be rehabbed in order to have that appraisal come in at a little bit higher value based on the repairs that would be made. When the appraiser has visited the home, taken many photos, done the measurements, written down a lot of information on the home, collected all the data about the comparable property information within half a mile of the subject property, they will complete a report and they will submit it to the lender. One thing that I always do when I meet with the appraiser, I ask them, when will the real estate appraisal be complete? That way I know when to contact the lender to find out what occurred with the appraisal and to verify that it came in at the purchase price. Once the appraisal report comes back, the buyer will review it, sometimes with their agent. They'll also speak with their lender about it, especially if something is wrong with the appraisal, that it comes in low. If the appraisal, for whatever reason, should come back lower than the agreed upon purchase price, and the buyer has some options. The buyer can make up the difference in cash. What they would do is they would just increase their down payment to make up that difference. For example, if the buyer had offered $300,000 for the property and you, the seller, had accepted that, but then the appraisal comes in at $290,000, then the buyer would need to bring that extra $10,000 to the transaction to keep the deal alive. Another option is the buyer can appeal the appraisal. I was recently representing a past client that I had helped sell a house, buy a house, and now he wanted to purchase a piece of land in Pine Valley. And when the appraisal came in, it came in low, substantially low. So I talked with Frank about it, and I contacted Frank's lender. I provided loads of information that I had provided to the appraiser. And long story, but through a lot of extra work, a second appraisal was ordered, and that appraisal came in at the purchase price. So Frank was thrilled and was able to finish purchasing this piece of land that he plans on building his dream home on. And the other option, besides the buyer bringing in the funds, attempting to get an appraisal review, the last thing is the seller can sell the price at the appraised value. That would mean that you, the seller, would sell the home at the appraised valuation of the property. And the last thing that could possibly happen is the contract is canceled. This is not an ideal situation for either you, the seller, or the buyer. But if the buyer has an appraisal contingency, which most do, they can walk away at any time before they remove that contingency in writing. There is another thing that's been going on recently. It's called an appraisal gap, and I have another video on this channel about that, so you might want to watch that next. This is a path that the buyers can take when they make the offer and we're in the negotiations. Sometimes if a buyer is making an offer that I truly believe the value is not there for an appraisal, then I would put into the seller's counter offer to the buyer's offer a caveat about an appraisal gap. This means that the buyer would agree, let's say in the case of the $300,000 house that appraised for $290,000, this would be where the buyer would say, okay, I'm willing to pay $10,000 more than the appraised value if it should come in low. I recently had a situation in Chula Vista that I was helping a trustee with a home in a trust administration, and she received an offer that was way higher than our list price. I believe we were listed at $625,000. The offer was at $675,000, so I wrote into the seller's counter offer that if the property came in less than the $675,000, the buyer would pay up to $25,000 towards that contract. And the good news is, in this crazy market that we're having, I was able to actually get the appraisal in at $675,000, so the appraisal gap did not come into play. So those are the 4 options when things don't go well in a transaction and the appraisal comes in low. Your buyer can make up the difference with either an appraisal gap, or if you didn't have that in your contract, just bring the money to the table. The seller can sell for less. We can request a review of the appraisal, or we cancel the contract and move on. The last thing I want to share with you is when a transaction is canceled because the appraisal came in low, the appraisal is now part of the disclosures that the seller would need to disclose to the next buyer. So, of course, we want to work out the first buyer that we are in contract with, because all the other buyers are going to be aware that the appraisal came in at a certain number. I hope you find this of value. Please, as always, like, subscribe, hit that bell button, and tell me your stories or ask any questions that you might have. See you next time.